The Mass Effect universe is massive, and there's still a lot left undiscovered in the Milky Way Galaxy. And with the latest BioWare blog post saying that they are going to be bringing the deep franchise history forward, I expect that this will include the game's own world history. So first, let's look at the aliens mentioned in Mass Effect that we haven't met yet. First off, the raloi, which are probably the race we know the most about. In the year 2184, the raloi, a feathery avian race, made contact with the Asari. A year later, the Council welcomed the raloi to the galactic community with a welcome ceremony. We can read about it in the Cerberus Daily News Post, and it reads, "The Citadel Council welcomes the planet Terves to the galactic community today. The planet's sentient species, the raloi, launched their first space telescope into orbit last year, which detected the presence of the Asari cruiser Azades. Tomorrow, visitors all over from the galaxy will land outside 6 cities on Terves, bearing welcome wishes and gifts for the raloi. Tickets for the Council-sponsored ships have been sold out for months, and due to disease concerns, no other ships are legally allowed to planetfall at that time. A comm buoy near Terves will be dedicated to sending welcome messages to the planet for 20 galactic standard hours." The report mentions that no one is allowed to travel to Terves due to a disease outbreak, which was labeled H7N7 avian flu virus, which is clearly referencing the bird flu. Due to this flu outbreak, the raloi delegation had to wear environmental suits during their 3-month stay on the Citadel to learn about galactic law, history, alien biology and culture, and Mass Effect physics. But it does seem like the races of the Council were excited to meet the raloi, as the Council-sponsored shuttles were completely sold out, filled with visitors and gifts for the raloi. And during the welcome ceremony, some Krogan representatives of the Council were actually ejected from the ceremony when they introduced a violent Krogan sport called Gagoula, and multiple deaths and injuries followed soon after. You can actually hear about the fate of the raloi from an in-game broadcast in the Spectre office.
In an apparent bid for self-preservation, the entire raloi delegation has left the Citadel. In parting, Representative Arika said, "We have no wish to battle those who have yet to wrong us, nor have we the capability. The raloi plan to destroy all artificial satellites and observation equipment they currently have in orbit. They say the Reapers will see them as a pre-spacefaring civilization and spare their planet. The raloi species made first contact with the Asari and were formally welcomed into the galactic community last year. From across the Milky Way, this is the Alliance News Network."
So it seems the raloi wanted to trick the Reapers into thinking they were not advanced enough to be worthy of harvesting. We never learn if their plan was successful, so they still might be out there. If they were successful, their homeworld Terves may be untouched by the Reapers, so we don't know their fate. But if we're back in the Milky Way Galaxy for the next game, which I assume will be the case, it would be the perfect time to officially introduce them to the galaxy, especially if they'd been successful at tricking the Reapers. That would make for quite a story. And there isn't any official concept art of the raloi. There is some amazing fan art with several different concepts, but we have no idea what BioWare actually intended them to look like. So this is still something brand new they could introduce with an interesting history and connection to the original trilogy. So move over, Turians, there's a new bird in town. Also important to note that this popular specific piece of raloi concept art is from a fan contest on Fextra Life back in 2012, made by a fan. It's a great piece, but it isn't official art. There also isn't any official concept art of the next aliens I'm going to cover because they simply don't have a physical body when we learn of them. The virtual aliens are probably Mass Effect's most interesting race, and one that I hope we finally meet in the next game. There are several Cerberus Daily News articles about an encounter with a mysterious ghost ship. I'll include screenshots if you want to read them in full, but here's a detailed summary. In 2185, a ghost ship with a strong AI signature entered Solarian space in the Antillean system. After everything that had happened with the Geth, the Council's stance on AI had become even more solidified, and when this ghost ship was discovered, they initially worried it was an incoming Geth attack. The Solarian director of near-orbital security consulted Quarian advisors and determined it was not a Geth signature. He then went on to say, "The ship's intelligence then communicated with us. It asked us to calculate the value of pi to the first quadrillion digits. Some 20 questions followed after that, all of them beyond our realm of expertise. We're currently awaiting advice from outside consultants before proceeding. As yet, the ship matches to no known alien species. So it seems like their mathematical system is similar to ours, but more importantly that they are far more intelligent than even the Solarians. The entire scientific community was excited by this discovery, and an MIT exobiologist, Jordan Detweiler, learned from his research on the ship that it is roughly 8,000 years old, specifically saying that an alien race has downloaded its consciousness to a massive array of quantum computers on board the vessel, and that these aliens now reside entirely in a virtual world. He estimates the population is close to 1 billion individuals, and that the ship's AI is something of a caretaker to these people, or even a god depending on how you look at it. More importantly, the AI is now requesting our help. It says a power failure is imminent and threatens the entire virtual civilization. We learn that these virtual aliens left their homeworld roughly 8,000 years after their planet was about to go supernova. Their new ship becomes their home, but it seems it was only able to sustain power for those 8,000 years. The galaxy learned of this impending doom the virtual aliens were facing because of their starship losing power, and this caused a galaxy-wide debate. Some evolutionary biologists even claim that their ship dying was a natural order of things. One Turian scientist said that the aliens were clever, but clearly not clever enough to build a better battery, and so they essentially failed evolution and should be allowed to die. In response to this, Detweiler, the MIT exobiologist, claimed that not helping was essentially committing genocide, and this led the council to become involved for further consideration. The virtual aliens were on a very short deadline. While the council was debating even helping them, the ship's power supply dropped to 4% and was in danger of failing entirely. To make matters worse, hackers boarded and hacked into the virtual civilization. Before the hackers were caught, they spent 6 hours interfacing with the ship's computers. But during those 6 hours, 180 years had passed in the virtual world. The two hackers were greatly affected by this. Both hackers went into deep comas from their bodies being unable to absorb so much from the virtual world. The Cerberus Daily Report stated that trying to connect their minds to their bodies after being away for so long mentally was too large a shock. Physically, they were fine, but their minds were essentially scrambled eggs. Interesting to think about how advanced their civilization is considering how much time has passed and how much more time they've had to evolve, especially if our minds can't comprehend their world after interfacing. After all this happened, the council finally reached a decision, and reports surfaced that the council was going to rule against helping the virtual aliens and their dying ship due to their fear of AI and the potential for it to pose a security threat of unknown dimensions. Detweiler heard of this and inserted himself into the virtual alien world to warn citizens of the council's decision. He then returned 1 minute later, which is roughly equal to 1 year in the virtual world. When he returned to our physical world, he brought a treaty to the council, and the details on this actually remain unknown. One inside source claims that the virtual aliens offered scientific advancements far beyond anything we have in return for the council's help. The matter was deemed classified and no further details were provided. If this is true, the council is currently in possession of some extremely advanced technology. In the end, the council did help the virtual aliens. For what exactly, though, we don't know. The Cerberus News report also said that Detweiler embarked on a council-sanctioned mission into the virtual world to further diplomatic contact. There was quite a bit of controversy surrounding his visits to the virtual world and his sightings around the Citadel, as Detweiler had been known for his dealing with the virtual aliens. This controversy became so heated that even his daughter showed up to the Citadel, demanding to see her father, claiming that he was in danger. After finally seeing her father, Kyra released a statement regarding her visit with her father. He didn't even know who I was, his own daughter. I got 5 minutes to speak with him before security whisked him away. Is he sick? Is he brain damaged? This caused a media backlash from every corner of the galaxy, and the council was being accused of covering up Detweiler's deteriorating medical state. The backlash became so bad that they finally arranged a press conference where the spokesperson revealed that Jordan Detweiler did indeed visit the virtual alien world he discovered, on behalf of the council. Yes, Detweiler was seen on the Presidium recently, but this was his body, not his mind. He has, for lack of a better term, swapped with an alien consciousness in the virtual world. This procedure was the most stable way for their ambassador to gain access to our physical universe for diplomatic discussions. Essentially, it is revealed that the ambassador for the virtual aliens, Ambassador Saigon, had been using Dr. Detweiler's body and swapping consciousness with him, and it was actually Ambassador Saigon who was speaking with the council. Saigon asked for asylum from the council, saying that she wished to leave the virtual world. Obviously, Saigon was using Detweiler's body, and he did not want to join the virtual world. So a volunteer stepped forward to trade Saigon's mind and enter the virtual world, while Saigon joined the physical world. After this, roughly 400 volunteers from several races swapped places with the virtual aliens and traded worlds. When Ambassador Saigon asked to remain in the physical world, she gave a public speech during a press conference that shed some light into what the lives of the virtual aliens was like. And she says, "Long ago, our people lived in your universe of physical matter. When our sun went supernova, we sought refuge in a virtual world free of needless pain and suffering, free of climate disasters, disease, and many other ills faced by creatures of solid flesh. Some now feel that remaining in this world after the dangers had passed was a mistake. We realize that distress can sometimes provide a catalyst for evolution. We miss the turmoil of physical existence. As such, I formally petitioned the Citadel Council for asylum. I no longer wish to return to my former world." We don't know anything about what the virtual aliens' original physical form looks like, but their ability to swap minds and travel that way in and out of the virtual world is really interesting. We already know from the Rachni that possessing consciousness in the Milky Way Galaxy is possible. So while this isn't exactly revolutionary, the entire concept of these virtual aliens is fascinating. We also don't know what happened to them after the Council helped their ship. But there are currently roughly 400 individuals in the Milky Way Galaxy that were once part of the virtual civilization, and then swapped minds to join our physical world. And I would love to meet them in the next game. Maybe we could even help them build bodies to move between their virtual world and our physical worlds. Another interesting species that was discovered around 2185 is the kirik, a beetle-like invertebrate. They aren't a fully sentient species, but last we heard of them from the Cerberus Daily News updates, the Council was evaluating the kirik's current level of intelligence to compare it to standard galactic sapience test. When the kirik were initially discovered on Ekrum, science were shocked when the insects shoved them back using their biotics. These kirik were seemingly the first insect-like species to be intelligent enough to develop and control their biotic powers. While they were being studied by scientists, they would send patterns back and forth with the colony, and it seemed like they were trying to communicate. Initially, they were thought to be as intelligent as dogs or cats, but soon the scientists realized the kirik were learning at an advanced rate, and then were thought to be as intelligent as dolphins. One scientist even proposed the species to be uplifted, which sparked a debate on the extranet. After this, the Council sent several ships to monitor the kirik's homeworld Ekrum, while they decided whether to let the research on the planet continue. The uplift debate continued, some fearing it would be another situation mirroring the Krogan's uplifting. One scientist fought for the kirik to be uplifted into the fold of sentience, which would grant them rights and protections that no dolphin or Vayak ever had, a species that we have no information on. The best part of all of this is that the kirik seemed receptive to being studied. The final Cerberus Daily News report on the subject said, "The researchers studying Ekrum's biotic insect colony became unexpectedly stranded today. We told the kirik we'd have to leave if our swarm queen, that is the Citadel, pulled us off planet, says head research Dr. Andile Nadaye. When we started back to base, the colony lifted our ground car right off the road because it wanted to keep talking. Despite the power of the hive's biotics, Dr. Nadaye said he never felt in danger and that the kirik immediately expressed concern that they'd hurt the team's feelers. Their curiosity is incredible, says Dr. Nadaye. Leaving them after first contact would feel like abandoning a child. In response to this incident, the Citadel has sent several representatives to evaluate the kirik's current level of intelligence and compare it to standard galactic sapience test. These beetle-like insects sound sentient enough to be friendly and curious, and while the Reapers probably wouldn't deem them harvestable, they would be extremely interesting to meet in the future and see where this eventually leads. Did the Council decide to let the research continue? Did they pass their sapience test, and were they uplifted to a higher sentience? The next species is one we have already met, but still know little about, and that is the Yogg. When the Yogg were first discovered, it was from a Citadel Council survey that found their home planet Parnack back in 2025. When the Yogg were first discovered, they were a pre-spaceflight civilization, and their technology was equivalent to that of the 20th century Earth's technology. The Council sent a delegation of ambassadors to make first contact and to establish diplomatic delegations. But unfortunately, the Yogg saw the actions of the ambassadors as believing themselves equals to the Yogg instead of being their subordinates, and thus saw this as a sign of contempt and massacred the entire delegation. Because of this, the Yogg were barred from Citadel space, all contact was severed, and Parnack was declared off-limits. Their entire culture is built around dominance and aggressive leadership. The Yogg do not operate without a single leader that has first established their dominance over the other Yogg. This pack mentality makes the concept of equality offensive to them, hence why the Council's attempts at delegation while seeming friendly were seen as offensive. The Council said that the Yogg's aggression and need for control makes them poor candidates to integrate with the galactic community. Sometime after this initial failed first contact, the Shadow Broker had his agents abduct a Yogg for study. Their mission was successful, though they did kill many Yogg in the process trying to find one even interested in leaving Parnack. The Shadow Broker's studies showed that the Yogg were extremely intelligent, on par with even the Solarians, and so the Shadow Broker arranged for the Yogg to secretly take the place of one of his operatives and lead strike teams to gather intelligence and neutralize threats. Unfortunately, the Yogg was much more violent than anticipated, and it became a problem for the Shadow Broker, who eventually gave orders for the Yogg to be eliminated. We don't know the details, but somehow the Yogg was able to actually kill the original Shadow Broker before his own assassination. And this gave the Yogg the perfect opportunity to take over the Shadow Broker's identity. After taking this new identity, he immediately revoked the kill order on himself, and no one knew anything had happened. The Yogg remained the Shadow Broker for the next 60 years and became quite well known and feared. It was in 2185 when Liara figures out who the current Shadow Broker was, and we all know how the Shadow Broker DLC plays out, and that this Yogg was then killed. But this isn't actually the only Yogg we learn about in the Milky Way Galaxy. During Mass Effect 3, a Solarian research facility on Surkesh captured and experimented on several Yogg. The Solarians planned to secretly uplift the Yogg, just like they did with the Krogan. During a Cerberus assault on the STG base, a Yogg escapes containment and goes on a rampage, killing many Cerberus soldiers. And we don't know what happened to this Yogg. So aside from the more popular races, these are the ones that we currently know exist and are alive within the Milky Way Galaxy and could make a return in the next game. And with anything being a possibility, considering Javek's appearance despite the Prothean extinction, let's cover some races that are from previous cycles and are no longer alive from what we know. First, there was Javek's cycle, which we know was wiped out 50,000 years ago by the Reapers at the end of their cycle. But we do know some information about the various races that existed during this time. The most interesting of these races is a synthetic race that existed alongside the Protheans. They were essentially Geth equivalent of that cycle. They were known as the Tsaw Teal, and got this name because they were originally an organic race named the Tsaw that then implanted themselves with symbiotic AI, thus the name Tsaw Teal. Their homeworld became inhospitable, and the AI implants were used as a way to enhance their intelligence to help them survive. When the Reaper's harvest began, they subjugated the AIs, the Tsaw Teal, who then seized control of the bodies of their masters and altered their genetic material at the deepest level. This transformed the Tsaw into synthetic monsters and their offsprings into slaves. They multiplied in droves that Javik says blotted out the sky. Because of this, the Protheans decided to wipe them out and sent the star of the Tsaw's home system into supernova. The Ourivores are another race that lived during Javik's cycle, and they had an interesting encounter with the Asari. The Ourivores were an aggressive species. They spent most of their time searching for resources to exploit, which led them to Thessia, the Asari homeworld, which is abundant in resources. In the Ourivores' attempt to strip Thessia of these resources, the Protheans actually intervened to help the Asari, who at this point were non-starfaring and would have been wiped out were it not for the Prothean intervention. This interaction led the then primitive Asari to interpret this as divine intervention from the Protheans and saw them as their god Athame, saving them from the other jealous gods, the Ourivores. We learn about this in Mass Effect 3 when we visit the Temple of Athame, and the Prothean AI is revealed. Aside from this conflict, the Ourivores also warred with the Densoran, but we don't actually have any details on this war. And that is all that we know about the Ourivores, and while they are currently extinct, the actual cause of their extinction is unknown, but because of the Prothean cycle's timeline, it is assumed to be the Reapers as well. The Densoran were a species that existed around 47,814 BC during the Prothean cycle. They were eventually conquered and absorbed by the actual Protheans, and were then forced to call themselves Protheans as well. But according to Javik, the Densoran were more advanced in some ways that even the actual Protheans were not. Unfortunately, they were not intelligent enough to pacify the Reapers, but they did try. When the Reapers evaded, the Densoran tried to appease them by sacrificing their own children in hopes of being spared. This obviously failed and actually helped the Reapers harvest them even faster, and thus they were exterminated. The Sinril were another race that existed during Javik's cycle, and he tells Shepard that they obtain eternal peace and were a peaceful race themselves. But they were then later exterminated by the Dedeker, who were presumably also wiped out by the Reapers. The Anderomi are another race we learn of that conquered the Vandamar, and the Vandamar being conquered is the only thing we know about them. Those are currently all the races that we know of from Javik's cycle, but there are more identified races all throughout the galaxy that are either long extinct or that we know very little of. So let's start with the Inusanan. The Inusanan are a race that we actually see in Mass Effect 1, supposedly. I couldn't find any official confirmation of this, but it is widely presumed that these statues were originally intended to be Protheans when the first game came out, but with the introduction of Javik in Mass Effect 3, this was changed and they were supposed to be other races from Javik's cycle under the Prothean umbrella. In Matt Rhodes' blog post where he goes into detail about the concept art behind the series, he talks about designing the Protheans based off of the Prothean from Mass Effect 1, which is this statue. This design is intended to be ambiguous, as Matt says these were intended to represent the possible foundation for all species. The Inusanan inhabited Ilos long before the Protheans, and it was the ruins of their civilization that gave the Protheans the knowledge to develop Mass Effect technology. Hence why it is believed that these statues on Ilos could represent the Inusanan. From a codex in Mass Effect 2, found on the Normandy crash site, it says, approximately 127,000 years ago, a series of battles were fought over it by two organic species, the Thi Han and the Inusanan. Their homeworld of Aingana is covered in destroyed ancient starships from this war. In the planetary entry, Historians believe the two races were fighting over the colonization of Eingana. There were so many destroyed ships that were pulled into the gravity well of the planet, as well as so many Mass Effect drive cores from the debris, that it dumped refined Element Zero all over the planet. This poisoned Eingana and caused multiple animal extinctions. The species that remained sometimes showed a tendency to develop biotic powers. But as we know from the Kirik, control of the biotics is usually limited to species that are intelligent enough to actually control them. The planet is too dangerous to explore because of the uncontrolled biotics, and thus no other information is known about this war. The Inusanan were wiped out by the Reapers. As mentioned, the Thi Han is the race that warred with the Inusanan over colonization on Eingana, and nothing else is known about them. It is presumed the Thi Han were also wiped out by the Reapers. A race called Zeoff were an ancient spacefaring race that built millions of elaborate crypts on the surface of Armeni. But Citadel Council law holds graves as sacrosanct, and thus no excavation or exploration has been done on Armeni. There are several human universities that wish to send archaeological excavations to explore the crypts, but the matter has been tied up in court and there is no other information about this race. The Ourthen were a race that existed across multiple worlds roughly 300,000 years ago in the Zelene system. It is believed that their homeworld is Halim, a dead planet where all existing life was wiped out due to an unknown cataclysmic event. According to findings from the debris, the Ourtheni technology was equal to the current galactic state-of-the-art technology. Mind you, this was 300,000 years ago. It is likely that they were also wiped out by the Reapers. The planet Joab was originally inhabited by a spacefaring primate-like race. There is currently no name for the species, but they were wiped out thousands of years ago when all of their civilization centers were targeted in a massive orbital bombardment. The explosion caused the dust from the blast to completely cover the sky and cut off the planet's star. This killed the planets, and the domino effect eventually killed the entire planet. This discovery comes from the capsules buried by the primate-like species. Remains of the primate-like species themselves were also found on both rows, still wearing spacesuits alongside some of their equipment. Their homeworld Joab has since been recolonized by humans. Another interesting planet discovery is on Thor, which was once home to a colony of an ancient spacefaring race. The planet itself was once covered in megastructures, but is now in ruins, though a pillar at the center of the ruin still stands and was covered in inscriptions that were unable to be translated for centuries. When it was finally translated by a Sari linguist, the writing was revealed to say, "Walk among these works and know our greatness." And on the opposite side of the pillar it says, "Monsters from the Id." There were also several races that worshipped the Leviathans. We learn about the Leviathan's Thralls from the Leviathan DLC, where we see the cave paintings on Namakli that show a human-looking race under the painting of a Leviathan. Every new species they encountered became their thralls, dedicated to serving the Leviathans. The species paid tribute and were given protection by the Leviathans in turn. These thrall species were used to build things for the Leviathan, and often they would build synthetics to aid them, and the synthetics would turn against them, yada yada yada. You know how the infamous organic versus synthetic tale goes. And we know that the Reaper Leviathan of Dis is nearly 1 billion years old. So the Leviathans would be older than this, as would their different thrall races. There was also a race that made installation art around the planet Chaska. They created rings made of small synthetic materials, which would catch the light and scatter in picturesque ways, and no one knows who it was that created these rings. And tinfoil time, these rings around the star from the actual trailer give me this vibe. They don't look like a typical dust ring, which would usually be around a planet instead of a star. Who knows? But there's someone out there decorating planets, and I'd like to meet them. There was also a race on Silen that seems like they discovered their own faster-than-light exploration instead of arriving through a relay. This same race may have also built the geothermal and solar power stations that are found within the system. Parnassus was deleted from the system. Maybe someone didn't want its existence to be known. Everything around this race is mysterious, but they seem very intelligent and self-sufficient. On planet 433 Spidao, it was discovered that the planet was formerly inhabited by a sapient race, which destroyed itself via nuclear warfare roughly 1,000 years ago. The planet originally had over 90 cities that are all now in ruins and are all still radioactive from their nuclear war. And Alpha Centauri currently has a primitive alien species living on it, which was discovered in 2186. The Asari scientists that were observing the species were ambushed by a long-lost group of human colonists, and thus the research was interrupted and we don't know anything more. On the planet Angia, large numbers of hollow, unpowered objects, thought to possibly be coffins of an ancient race, were discovered. All of these supposed coffins are the same size and appear to have sails or wings keeping them afloat in the Angia atmosphere. Unfortunately, the objects are too deep to be studied, so no further information is known about the coffins or who resides in them on the gas planet. The planet Aphers was once inhabited by a sapient terrestrial avian race in its Bronze Age, but unfortunately the planet suffered a series of massive impacts that vaporized habitation centers and killed off most of the planet's flora and fauna. The only current contemporary life that exists on the planet is a single-celled organism that lives in its seas. On the planet Carcosa, Asari discovered ruins on its barren surface. These ruins seem to be of an ancient city dating back more than 2.7 million years ago. There is only one part of the ruins that remains intact, and that is a chamber that appears to be a throne room. This throne room overlooks a large depression which is believed to have once been a massive lake. Scientists speculate that the people of Carcosa polluted their own planet until it was no longer habitable, and this had a domino effect which spoiled the planet's freshwater supply. In one of the Cerberus daily news reports, we learn of planet DC 1938, a small garden world that exploded when its uranium core collapsed upon itself, a rare phenomenon called core fusion. This massive explosion killed more than 5 billion inhabitants and left only one survivor. An infant was rocketed from the planet's explosion and was picked up by a human cruiser called the MSV Kent. The infant was taken and was put under medical care, where his atmosphere was recreated so that he could survive. Hilariously, his home planet's atmosphere is made up of 65% nitrogen, 20% oxygen, and 15% krypton. And if you're unfamiliar with Superman, the year 1938 was his DC comic premiere. So yes, Superman is in the Mass Effect universe. On the planet Vecchio, skeletal remains of an ancient humanoid race, along with their primitive ceramic grave goods, were discovered at burial sites hidden in the mountain ranges. No one is sure who traveled to Vecchio, since it is considered inhospitable and the surrounding planets do not have intelligent life. On the planet Siano, remnants of artificial structures that are 1,000 years old were found on the site of the planet's hemisphere that remains locked to its star Dorada. What is odd is that on the opposite side are bunkers of radioactive waste from fission power plants. The 1,000-year-old structures have been badly degraded by being in the sun's light for too long. Orbiting the planet Mnemosyne, we find a derelict Reaper in Mass Effect 2. Cerberus estimated that this Reaper was disabled 37 million years ago by a mass accelerator fired by an unknown spacefaring race. And this actually connects to Atomis, which is a super-terrestrial world that shows evidence of an attack from space. It once held water, but the now waterless planet shows patterns of bombardment by Dreadnought-class kinetic weapons. All of the planet's regions that were settled by its people were hit by this weapon, and few relics have been found on the planet. What has been found points to an advanced spacefaring culture that thrived somewhere between 20 and 40 million years ago. There's theories that this planet and Clendagon's Great Rift Valley and the derelict Reaper were all connected to the same bombardment by the same weapon. They all existed within the same time frame and seem to share the same evidence of destruction. Found on one of Gamayun's moons, Gagoula, was the wreckage of a well-preserved alien starship. There isn't much information revealed about this starship, except that it was built for a race that seems like they are horizontally oriented. The planet Farkrothu has several moons which have been sculpted into the likeness of an anthropodal alien race not yet known to Council science. Dating suggests the moons were sculpted over 500,000 years ago. There are several races throughout the Milky Way Galaxy, and from what we know, it seems like a lot of races were wiped out by the Reapers during previous cycles. Several of these planets seem to have suffered cataclysmic events specifically targeting their civilization-dense areas, which sounds like possible Reaper attacks to me. And we know Leviathan of Dis was nearly 1 billion years old, meaning that there have been a galaxy-wide Reaper harvest at least 20,000 times. Imagine all of the races we know nothing about, all of the races that were completely erased from history because of their harvesting. It's honestly depressing to think about. But I imagine with so many races that were destroyed, there's still a lot we have not explored or discovered within the Milky Way Galaxy. With all this information about these races, would you like to meet any of these in Mass Effect 5? And would you like to learn more about their stories? Which race has the most interesting history? Let me know in the comments, and thank you for watching.